All right. Looks like we are live.
All right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Torn Tuesday. I'm your host, Justin. Cliff is down there trying to get his mic sorted,
I
and
can
we're
hear
oh,
you.
we
Body.
can hear him,
Yes,
and we're joined by a very special guest, someone I've wanted to talk to for many, many moons. Matt from Nerd of the Rings.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, Matt. Nice to see you. Welcome aboard, man.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very much so. Very much.
Well,
Welcome.
it has been a big week for Tolkien news and Tolkien fans, and people are saying no sound. Hold on, one more. Like it says I'm sending sound.
Oh, it says they can hear everyone now on YouTube
Okay,
anyway.
all right. You guys can hear me. Give us the thumbs up, right? Uh, People are saying no sound. I'm sending sound. I see sound being sent right now.
Well, I can hear both of you. Hello.
Yep.
Hello. Nice to have you both here.
Yep.
Welcome again. Can the
Okay,
audience?
yeah, now they can hear everything. Okay, cool. So we're here.
Ah.
I don't know what you caught. Facebook didn't have audio,
Ah.
and now it says they do. So you know what? I'm blaming that on Facebook.
Yep.
It was Facebook's problem, and Facebook is
Mhm.
everybody's problem.
That's why
Um,
I stopped using Facebook generally, for many reasons. But hello, I've got to say, my tip of the hat, especially to having Matt from Nerd of the Rings join us here at TheOneRing.net. We've been around for over 20 years, but considering this new kid on the block, Matt, you've gotten such a thunderous amount of well-deserved attention and subscribers. And I just have to say, continued excellence is always to be found there at Nerd of the Rings on your channel. And I just love what you do with your maps and your graphics. And it is so nerd satisfying. It is so satisfying to watch your videos. I love it. I just want you to know that I love it.
Well, thank you so much. Coming from you, Cliff, that is high praise indeed. I really appreciate that,
Man,
man.
I mean it. I mean it. If I had those editing skills and could do those motion graphics like that, boy, that's great. That's really great. But soon, we'll get to something in the future. We'll make an announcement later on in
Absolutely.
the show about Matt and I talking about something interesting in the future. But Justin is bringing us together for all of us to gather around a huge amount of news headlines.
Hmm.
Um, let's get started. Yeah.
Yeah, 250,000 subscribers on YouTube. Yeah. Yeah. Quarter million. Yeah, I can use the phrase quarter million, which sounds I think that sounds more impressive than 250,000. Absolutely. Ah,
The,
gosh, I don't think I've ever used that term to describe myself, honestly. Yeah,
hey, I
it's
hate to interrupt, but the
yeah.
YouTube channel now says that there's no sound for Justin and myself. So, yeah, but
Huh,
Matt, I want to make sure your answer is heard by
yeah,
everybody. So, sorry to
yeah.
interject,
No,
but
that's all right.
I do want to know. I want to know what you have to say.
I'll just start typing everything. I'll just do a
Well,
text chat.
I wish my
Okay.
American Sign Language was better.
Okay, so they've got audio on Cliff, it sounds like. So yeah, I'll go ahead. So the question was uh an influencer. Yeah, like I've never used that term to describe myself. It feels odd, but yeah, I mean back in October, I think it was, I was at about 5,000 subscribers, and then it just kind of exploded from there, and it's just kind of been a roller coaster that I've been riding since at this point. Um, yeah, I mean it's just a fun way to um, share a love of Tolkien with a lot of people, and I think people just really like escaping into this world. Obviously, the three of us can attest to the joys to be had there, and I think with the the Amazon show, and now this new animated film coming out. It's just more and more opportunities for people to be exposed to this awesome world.
Why do you think 250,000 since October is such a huge number? I mean, thousands and thousands of people on Twitch and YouTube, like they work years and years, to try to get these numbers. I mean, we've been streaming this show for 10 years and we barely have 20,000. What's the secret? I mean, it feels like you hacked an algorithm or something.
Right?
Like, is there a format that you follow?
Man, a big thing that I've discovered with YouTube is consistency. I release once a week. Occasionally I'll do live streams. But every Saturday at noon, I release a new video. Really, like, the biggest advice that I give, when, folks trying to start channels or they've got smaller channels and they ask me for advice is, you got to be talking about something that you love for sure. I do this on the side.
You hear that, Cliff? You should start talking about things you love.
Yeah, I kind of love the way you think, Matt.
Yeah.
I love that.
But yeah, I mean, I do get that, people get a little too wrapped up in trying to like get big, and like that was never my intention with this. Like, I never expected it to get this big, honestly. I just knew that if I was going to talk about anything, then it was that I had enough knowledge of, it was going to be Lord of the Rings. And so I just kind of started doing it. And it's I think it's a common thing where people look at an explosion of numbers or something and say like, wow, that happened overnight. Well, I mean, for the first 9-10 months that I was doing it, I almost made no progress whatsoever. It took me 10 months to get to 5,000, and that was like inching along over the course of 10 months.
Yeah.
And
So what clicked? What clicked then? Like, was it like your videos are all like 10 minutes long, or is like?
So around that time, it pretty much coincided with my release of the Complete Travels of Gandalf. So that was by far my longest video. It's like 25 minutes long, and it tracks all of his travels throughout his entire life. And I had been doing stuff with the animated maps before that, but that was the first video that I kind of made more intention of utilizing it to its fullest and as much as I could humanly possible. Like, if I can map something, then I will. Starting with that video.
Sounds very Tolkien. It doesn't it, Cliff?
Right.
Yeah, I want to let Matt finish his thought, but we'll get back to that. I have something to say about that.
Yeah. So I have a venture a guess is what you're gonna say too. But yeah, so that was the first time that I kind of found my niche, I guess. Like, I love the maps, and I love knowing where things are. So when I first watched the films, I was obviously a big fan, but then afterwards discovering like, oh, here's where Osgiliath is in relation to Minas Tirith. Here's where Sam and Frodo were at the Black Gate. Oh wow, they went, obviously just in the films they went to Osgiliath, not in the books, but having a sense of place for everything, and knowing the Uruks did not turn northeast to take the Hobbits to Isengard. They actually turned northwest to take the Hobbits to Isengard. So that's a fun little bit of trivia that you can brag to your friends about.
So we've had huge scoops, whether it's like the Amazon show description, or we've announced like the 4K editions, which were a huge surprise. Like, and Cliff is as passionate as we can get out. He's written books. He's in the Tolkien library. He's made movies. So it's like, what are we missing? Maybe instead of these 1 hour live streams, like we have, I almost feel like, to get to the next level, that fans just want to consume content like that on YouTube. So maybe we need to like start editing videos rather than doing them live, so they're a little more polished.
I think they're there's definitely the content is more important than the polish, for sure. A lot of people, when they start YouTube channels, they don't start it because they're so overly concerned with how good it is. They want it to be absolutely perfect. And no matter what you do, your first videos are not going to be perfect. If I went back and looked at my first few videos, I would say, God, those suck, most likely. Yeah, and I think being digestible, is a big thing. Like, if what you do is a long stream, not everybody's going to be able to sit down and dedicate a lot of time to that. And this is part of this is guesswork because nobody really knows how the algorithm works. We all guess, but it's like the algorithm giveth and the algorithm taketh away, I think. But yeah, I think, digestible pieces, a lot of my videos are somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to, like I said, the Gandalf one's like 25 minutes. That's my longest. But yeah, so like it's digestible, and I try to hit that sweet spot where like you don't have to be an uber Tolkien nerd to get it. But even the old uber Tolkien nerds might pick up some things that they either didn't know or forgot or had glanced over during a reading. But then I also keep in mind people like my brother who have seen the movies, have at least attempted to read the books, and kind of sort of remember most of the stuff.
I would venture to say, Matt, that there is some magic alchemy in what you've stumbled upon in creating your videos. And let us not ever underestimate the power of these maps. And I just want to get back to that because you mentioned it just now. And I thought, okay, that's great. That was just like a throwaway line. But no, really, you said if you could map it, you would. And if you get a little bit deeper into cognitive psychology and people who actually study this for real, much more than I do, there is a correlation to how we read Tolkien and how constantly we're always looking at this page in the front.
Right.
Constantly. Every other paragraph, stopping the flow of our reading because we go right back to this. And at this point, Tolkien's publishers were like, wouldn't it be great, Professor, if you could actually provide us a map? It was at that level that even the publishers understood. There's something about that intrinsically draws us into this type of storytelling. I wish that I knew more specifically the way a professor of cognitive psychology and human behavioral studies would probably understand it better than I could articulate it. But you're really onto something with what you create on your channel. And I find it endlessly satisfying that you have specific size icons. The avatars are uniform. Your choice of colors to associate colors of spiritual association or allegiance to kingdoms or whatever. And certainly when you always revolve a character back to black with the red vein through it. And then that's when Matt is telling us this person has completely changed their allegiance in the way that Tolkien has written them in that point of the story. And those visual cues that you are so good at doing for all of us are better than most, I would bet, if I was a gambling man, and I'm not, but I would bet dollars on cents that is one of the biggest pieces of your success, is the way it appeals to people having, perhaps in some cases, a lack of familiarity with the text. And when they did read it, they didn't always correlate where the lines of travel were on the topography of the land. That years and years ago, for early versions of TheOneRing.net, when I got down to interview the author of the Atlas of Middle Earth, the late and great Karen Wynne Fonstad.
Yes.
One of my interviews that I was most excited to do out of my entire 20-year career, talking to every star from every movie, who cares? I wanted to talk to a real cartographer. And this woman was brilliant. It was such a great interview. We have to find the archive and republish it on the one.
Absolutely. That's a great book too.
It's absolutely wonderful. And so my hat is off to you for your consistency. And whether you knew it or not, you have magically opened up much greater understandings of people and places and things because of your emphasis on the place, the geography of the land. And your visuals are great and your maps are superb. I have nothing but praise, nothing but. But don't underestimate that. That is the magic alchemy I think that you've tapped into, I think.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Like, I kind of wonder because I don't get a lot of comments about the borders of the characters, because I do very specifically pick out, like, oh, these, these are the dwarves, so they've got like this stone background, and the elves have like this tree-ish background. And I do kind of wonder, as I'm making those, leading up to actually editing, I'm like, does anybody even notice this? Like, I've never heard anybody comment on it, so I don't know for sure.
Constantly. It is, dude, that, believe it or not, it's part of your branding, I think. And I love how thoughtful you are and deliberate you are, because there's a lot of consistency. You don't accidentally put a character's avatar in the wrong color circle. And you don't get these, there are no mistakes on your maps. When you even move, like the Dunlendings going back into, the Vale of Isengard, the Circle of Isengard, after, that but so you lead everyone exactly to where people need to understand better. That's how Saruman was so much better able to build allegiances with the old resentments of these people and actually lead them to war in the Two Towers. Because in all your explanation of Helm Hammerhand, you gave the people this beautiful map. You even moved more Dunlendings back up to. I just love the way you did that stuff. You're so good at those details, brother. I got to say thank you.
Well, everyone in the there's some people in the chat that are new to discovering Matt. Matt is on YouTube. You can find him at Nerd of the Rings, our number one favorite YouTube channel that starts with the word nerd. All others are jokes. All other nerd blank accounts are not worth your time. Nerd of the Rings is the one you want to follow, and he just hit 250,000 subscribers, which is a huge, giant milestone. And just as we wrap up this conversation, because we weren't expecting to talk about it, but it's such a big thing. I want to know how many hours per week does it take to run a channel like this?
I usually say, because I've never really timed it, but it does take up most of my evenings. I have a full-time job, regular 9 to 5, and so I come home and I'll spend Monday and Tuesday nights writing a script, and then I'll record it on Wednesday, edit the audio, and then get to work Thursday and Friday nights doing the video. So I'd say, somewhere between 20-30 hours maybe. Okay. I will say my Helm Hammerhand video, I busted that thing out. That was a record. I'm really proud of that one. I wrote that script in about an hour and a half and recorded it in 30 minutes, and then proceeded to edit it over the course of like a night and a half. So I busted that one out in about 8 hours. So I was pretty jazzed with that, because they announced the new film and I was like, I've got to do a Helm Hammerhand video now. So I called an audible. So my Glorfindel video is going to have to wait until this week now.
Well, let me bring it up on screen. The big news of the week that shocked everybody.
I can hear you fine.
So, War of the Rohirrim is the big announcement. It went quiet there because I don't know if I switch the scenes. So, War of the Rohirrim was just announced. It's a feature film being produced by Warner Brothers, and it is an anime film that is going to be produced by Adult Swim. Who is like the king of American anime right now, and have been for 20 years. They've brought on Philippa Boyens, who was the writer and producer of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, to come and consult on the lore. It is going to be in Peter Jackson's universe, and the proof of that is bringing on Philippa Boyens. And Cliff, what did you think when they announced who the writers were?
I was overjoyed. To be honest, there's one thing to say about people who have a track record, a proven track record of handling a legacy property. And believe it or not, the guys from the Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, have immediately shown their quality. They have totally shown their quality, to the tune of winning an Emmy Award, by the way, for that series. So yeah, they're great at what they do, and I'm really thrilled that they've been pulled into uh, this world. I'm going to pull up IMDb because I always need to have this right in front of me.
Is
And
you've been talking about the Dark Crystal reboot ever since it launched. You said
yeah,
it was one of the best fantasy shows of all time. You've sung nothing but praises. You appreciated that it had a single director for the whole season, Louis Letellier. Uh,
mhm. But
and
Louis Leterrier was driven entirely by his lead writers, Jeffrey Addis and Richard Elliott. And the team in the writers' room, they even brought in a very popular YA author, J.M. Lee, who was writing the young adult Dark Crystal books and was very successful with them as well. And their writers' room is so strong. And I'm really glad that these two guys have been brought in to do War of the Rohirrim. Really glad about it. Um, oh my God, no, wait. Are you serious? All right. I don't want to start, being like the negative person who turns this show very negative, but Netflix made the most colossal, unbelievable, and mystifying choice to not continue with further seasons of something that had drawn in so many viewers across so many demographics and even got them the Emmy Award. And they had an amazing infrastructure built in the studios in England. They had all the puppeteers, they had all the fabricators in the workshop. They were ready to go. And then Netflix pulled the plug. It is completely mystifying to me. So I guess the main benefactor of that choice is now Middle Earth. Now, us, the Middle Earth fans, who are also Dark Crystal fans, we get to have these two writers coming over here and telling us the story of Helm Hammerhand, which is, as directly pointed out by one of our live chat people in YouTube, it's our friend Nancy who says it's a great ghost story.
Mhm.
And doing a really good ghost story in anime is going to just be delicious in Middle Earth. I mean, they can go dark, they can go very dark. And as we know, it is not a very pretty ending. It is not a happy ending type of story. It's going to be really interesting to see. I'm so excited about this. I mean, I'm not even going to use my usual sense of hyperbole. I'm just going to stop there. I'm going to stop right there.
are you as excited about this, Matt?
Oh yes, I am really excited about this. I immediately that night that they announced it, I was like, I'm doing a live stream. I'm so jazzed about this. I love Rohan. Gosh, like the music, when people ask me what my favorite Lord of the Rings film is, like I know Fellowship is the popular answer, but I'm like, then you don't get any of Rohan. Like that's the toughest part of that question for me is like I can't pick Fellowship as my favorite because then I lose all the Rohan theme. But yeah, the history, gosh, I've for a long time I've been a advocate for seeing animated Middle Earth. One of my early videos was when the last season of Clone Wars was coming to a close, and I did a video, kind of a video essay, just trying something new, and basically stated my case for why the next time they go to make Lord of the Rings, they should do it animated. And I was kind of thinking it based on the mini epics that that Weta creates, the little figures, because I love the designs of those. But anime is cool too. I'm not a big anime person myself, but I'm always of the mindset I will take as much Middle Earth as people will give me. So yeah, I'm excited about it. Like Cliff said, like it has the potential to be dark or spooky. Gosh, just thinking about Helm Hammerhand and like going out all dressed in white in the middle of snowstorms to slay Dunlendings that are, sieging them at Helm's Deep, just kind of gives me goosebumps.
it it's really going to be intriguing. I loved all the different variations of uh, the Ghost in the Shell franchise, including Standalone Complex. and we're probably in for a treat with regards to not being shy about the darkness of the story, about what is haunting and captivating, about a leader of his people who is driven that far, who will go that far, and ends up where he ends up at the end of the story. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's there. It's been around for a while. People, you probably know the story by now.
It's been out for like 65 years. So
I know. Just maybe I should just stop worrying about spoilers then. But really,
I know.
there's and to have animation come back to a storytelling in Middle Earth or in Arda is very welcome to me. Let's regard that sense of abstraction that you can get when a fantasy story is told through illustrated fiction, graphic novel, or through puppetry, or also in this conversation through hand-drawn animation. The way that a movie like Onward works is the way that the people at Pixar decided to design and animate it so that the gags would work, the adventure would work, the wink and the nod to tabletop games. I mean, all those things could have been done in live action, but Onward and other animations, that's just one small example. But you get a sense of abstraction when you bring animation to the table to tell the story, and you can get away with things differently. You can play with time and gravity, certainly in the artist's hand, in a very different way. And I think it's to the benefit of the story now that we're used to this realism, even though it's fantasy. But Peter Jackson's photography, Andrew Lesnie, and his attention to photographing all the details of the armor and the costumes and the weapons, we're used to that hyper, even now in 4K ultra high def, we see stuff in Middle Earth now in a very literal way.
Well,
now we get Peter Jackson's version of Middle Earth, and we have the abstraction of animation to take us and tell very different tone and maybe do some things that wouldn't have been so achievable so easily in live action, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, I was just showing clips of the intro to Ghost in the Shell complex. I'm not super familiar with it. I don't know if you guys are, but as I understand it, the director Kenji Kamiyama of Ghost in the Shell standalone complex is like a rock star of animation, of Japanese animation. Like there are fewer names bigger than Kenji Kamiyama. Like Miyazaki might be the only name that is bigger. Is that off base?
No, I don't know. You should maybe he's super high profile, very much so. But you're you're gonna risk the ire of otakus everywhere just by not mentioning the people behind your name.
Yeah, but
I just pulled up. That's Makoto Shinkai, and he's also. I'm telling you, there's been a lot of attention that's going to Studio Ponok, and I think that they were the ones that did Mary and the Witch's Flower. Right? Am I mistaken?
You're the anime guy here.
Yeah.
No, okay, guys. Well,
that
was one of the directors who was one of Miyazaki's proteges. The director from Studio Ponok and the work that they're doing now are actually a lot of people who evacuated from or removed themselves from Studio Ghibli and went on to create some new films and some new work. So there are transitions of animators in these studios that are traceable back to the 1970s, as we have noted on our Twitter feed and in our articles we publish on TheOneRing. The original animators who worked with Topcraft all those many moons ago.
But I don't think Kenji was part of that group. But before we get back into the Hobbit history with anime, I just want to say you brought up a point like the look and feel of Peter Jackson's films, and the look and feel of any film starts with the cinematographer. And unfortunately, Andrew Lesnie is no longer with us. Neither is the second unit cinematographer. I forget his name, but he died as well. So we have two of the most important visual artists responsible for the look of Lord of the Rings. They're gone, and I think what no one what we're trying to what Warner Brothers had to figure out is like, how do you go from that Oscar-winning work in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings with a team that's no longer there? How do you transition to the next phase of the look of Middle Earth? And maybe Matt, you have some insight since you just did the video. Like, is this the way, the best way to kind of reset the visual expectation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily about resetting. It's just kind of I think they saw a story and a creative team that could do a good job in this medium, in animation, to tell this story effectively and to tell it well. I mean, I could see, I don't have a crystal ball or anything, but I mean, I could see Warner Brothers proceeding with, maybe, here's some animated movies, maybe, and then we go back to live action for a different story that calls for it. Like Cliff said, there's whichever medium they decide to tell it in, there's advantages and disadvantages to both. One of the things I thought of as Cliff was talking there, I think back to the first Deathly Hallows movie of the Harry Potter series, and the scene of the three brothers that's animated. When I don't know if you guys are into Harry Potter or not, but
yeah.
You've got the scene where Hermione's voiceovering this tale of three brothers. It goes into this amazing animation, and like I've heard so many people say that's one of their favorite parts of that movie in particular, and some for the whole series, is that
Right
scene.
here.
And it's that could have been told with a flashback with live action actors, but they went with a different medium because it had different advantages. And so I think Middle Earth is kind of this big sandbox that they're playing in right now, and maybe we get some animation, maybe we get some live action further down the road. I would be surprised if we don't end up going back to Middle Earth in live action in cinema, but I'm excited to see these one-offs, especially. Like, I love the choice of Helm Hammerhand, because it's a nice self-contained story. It's a very there again, geographically, it's a very like smaller scale geographically. Like, we can go into this world for hour and a half, 2 hours, tell this story and get out, and just a nice clean story. We've got a good amount to go off of Tolkien's writings. Obviously they're still going to have to come up with a lot of dialogue that's not in the books, but I feel like it's got like a perfect amount of information that we have to go off of for the story, for a nice one-off film. And so I'm excited to see if this works out and does really well, what other stories they decide to tell in this manner with one-off films.
And let's just set the scene, right? In case it wasn't completely clear. Into the Two Towers, the big battle at the end of the Two Towers movie is at Helm's Deep. Mm-hmm. Helm's Deep is named for Helm, King Helm Hammerhand. This movie is going to be the story of why the Deep and the Keep are named for this guy. Mm-hmm. Like, that's how much power and influence his story and his history has. I mean, Cliff, do you have any ideas without going too spoilery? Does why is it called Helm's Deep? Does he save the Deep? Does he die at the Deep?
Actually, the name of the location had a different name before. Correct, Matt?
Yes, it was known as the Soothburg.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I'm sure that if they're trying to do a framing device for this movie, it might be interesting that the opening credits or the opening framing device could show us, like the caption could be the name, the old name, and at the very end show a different caption and call it Helm's Deep.
Yeah.
Because basically the story is about the transition of the name because of the tragic actions of the people involved in that very small theater of war. And again, it's one of the most famous theaters of war in all of cinema. And that's not an overstatement. I mean, in all time, in the history of movie making, the Battle at Helm's Deep is an instant and for all time classic in movie history. So
Absolutely.
it's fascinating to me, really, that they've chosen this as their narrative place. And it's not going to be called Helm's Deep at the beginning, but I'm sure by the end of the story, or the credits roll, they might show that title card and show that the name changed. And we'd all be like, oh yeah, that is so cool. It's so
We'd
cool.
be cheering in the theater.
Yeah. No, hey, you just said the magic word. I'm mostly surprised by the news that this isn't broadcast on HBO Max
Yes.
with all the other DC animated feature films.
Well, I can explain that right now. That is,
who knew that this would be like a theatrical release. I would never have.
The Tolkien estate did. So we got a little bit of background here on what's happening. So, Cliff, it is in theaters because of Amazon. So, turns out the Tolkien estate sold the television series rights, not the movie rights. And Warner Brothers held on to the movie rights of anything mentioned in Lord of the Rings and anything mentioned in the appendices, which is exactly the same television rights that Amazon got.
Well, when Dave Filoni launched the Clone Wars, the first of them was theatrically released as a feature film. And I was one of the people in theaters when it first came out. And that was before any televised episodes were on the Disney Channel. I was there in theaters.
They had to overcome that theatrical release, if you recall. That was didn't go over the greatest.
I know, and now I'm dating myself, but I was in theaters when Batman: Mask of the Phantasm was released in theaters.
Well, that was a special event. That was like a phantom event. That was not a wide release. Matt, we've got to.
Yeah, it was a wide release. It was Batman: Mask of the Phantasm was released theatrically wide, way back when. And so DC Warner Brothers Animation have a history. They've got a long history, and it's been very successful. So let's see if Warner Brothers Animation can do it again and bring something to the table and make it work. They do have a track history.
Matt, we've got a question from the chat, and I want to know if this is true in your research. Says Helm Hammerhand, the king, wandered Rohan as a ghost, and his wraith defended the Hornburg. And maybe why it's called Helm's Deep is because his ghost still lingers there.
So again, without Cliff kind of set the precedent for not spoiling too much, but yes, I will say, eventually at some undisclosed time, it is rumored. This is one of those great mysteries of Tolkien. It is rumored that Helm Hammerhand's wraith prowls the hills of the area of the Hornburg, and it actually says that he kills foes with fear, which is an awesome line. So yes, that is the myth, at least. That could. We don't have a any dialogue where someone goes up and starts talking to his wraith. I think that might be where the Shadow of War game got that. I've had a lot of people say, like, wait, didn't he turn into a ring wraith? No, he did not turn into a ring wraith.
Oh my gosh, that I put that tweet out and I didn't think it would get that kind of attention, but let's not underestimate that there's a lot of Shadow of War fans out there.
Absolutely. They're great games.
But Sheepdog cannot turn into a pretty lady in a skinny cocktail dress.
Right. Well,
And neither did Helm Hammerhands become a Nazgul. So
well,
now you know.
well, Cliff, you're blowing my mind right now because
What?
I thought turning into a wraith was an evil thing, and you know what? Now that we're talking about it, it's kind of unfortunate that even in the extended editions, I they don't explain how they became wraiths. You know, you have the two wizards like discovering that the tombs are open, but there's almost like there's a disconnect between because they never explained like how a dead
Nothing,
person can
nothing
become a
beyond
wraith.
Yeah.
there's nothing beyond a few lines of dialogue that Aragorn has, or Strider, as he is known at that point in the story.
So a good guy can become a wraith.
Well, I think so. I think it's more so a legend. I think that's the way I interpret it as I read it. It's like I said, it's one of those great mysteries that Tolkien leaves us that we don't get all the answers, which is part of the reason why Middle Earth is so awesome, because there's so many answers that can be answered, but then there's those ones that are most tantalizing that are left to be a mystery. And so I kind of I kind of look at the Helm Hammerhand Wraith thing as like a local legend. He goes out while they're trapped in the Hornburg and um, you know, kills the enemy with his bare hands, and would sound his horn before he goes out each time. And the Dunlendings are like just stricken with fear. And so then, down the line at, again, undisclosed time to avoid spoilers, but obviously he's a man, he's eventually going to die. So at some future point he dies, and then there's this legend that his wraith, protects his people, around that area because he's still around, kind of thing. And
You know,
you can hear his horn once in a while on the hills or something.
honestly, one of the reasons that I like Two Towers the most over any other films is because they didn't go there. I'm sure Peter Jackson. I think fans would have allowed Peter Jackson to have a whisper of a ghostly apparition or someone speak in Aragorn's ear or something like that. The fact that we have the entire battle and there's no ghosts,
Mm-hmm.
it's incredible. Now, Cliff, let's put this in the timeline, right? The War of the Rohirrim anime that Warner Brothers Animation is doing is if so it's going to be set in PJ's world, Peter Jackson's world. So is the elf that shows up to on the last allegiance to Helm's Deep, is he alive at this time? And was he possibly involved or aware of the battles going on with Helm Hammerhand?
You mean in the movie when Haldir shows up with
Yes.
a squadron of elves from Lothlorien that were
Yes.
sent at the bidding of Lady Galadriel? Well, totally not book canon. We have to first of all
That's
state
why I was
Establish that.
saying
Yes.
this is in Peter Jackson's world.
only in the cinematic story. It might be possible. If so, if it is true, then there's an opportunity for the fans to really freak out, especially Craig Parker fans. And I know lots and lots of people who have, for many, many years, been fans of Haldir and big fans of the fact that the Arwen storyline that Peter Jackson was going to do was changed. She did not come to Helm's Deep. Instead, they brought Haldir in with elves from Lothlorien. And they got the story connected that way. And people are very grateful to have Haldir, especially in the extended editions. So, yeah, I'm going to say again, it's not book canon, but for the sake of pleasing the movie fans, and they want to do it, I think it would be a great surprise, and it would be a most welcome thing for fans to have Craig Parker come back and do a voice and have Haldir be part of this. But there's no place for elves in the story as it's written.
As it's written, yeah.
Yeah, so Matt and I are probably of the same mind that it would be nothing but fan service.
Yep.
And therefore, it might backfire as just fan service because I really don't see where you're going to put elves. In the first place, I never would have seen where you would put elves in the Battle of Helm's Deep the way that Peter did.
Who is the Rohirrim fighting war against? I mean, Sauron isn't back. Saruman isn't bad.
It's the Dunlendings who
Mhm.
are
Mhm.
the Dunlendings are men who live. If you look at the map, so there's Isengard, and then kind of around the mountainside, along the western side of the Misty Mountains. They became enemies of the Men of the West, essentially around the time the Numenorians came to Middle Earth. They would actually come in, like, there was massive deforestation. They were chopping up all kinds of trees, building their awesome ships and everything, and they made enemies with this group in, I believe it's Mineriath, and part of them are the Dunlendings, and they are just constantly, them and the Rohirrim are just constantly fighting one another.
The chat
And
room is
so
just is telling me to just go watch your dang video.
I do explain every bit of this actually in
Uh,
there. So yes, you
Yes,
should
he-
just go watch the video. But
okay,
it,
okay. So
yeah.
Absolutely,
we
absolutely.
put the timeline like there could be elves, but there's no story reason to have the elves
Yeah.
unless they show the elves not showing up. That would
Yeah.
be interesting for Haldir to be like, hard pass. But
Yeah.
Cliff, is this like beginning of the Second Age, or does Gollum exist right now, or are hobbits in the Shire? Like, where's Gollum at this point in time?
Oh boy, you're making me grab the book because I was just actually sending you photographs of this, wasn't I? I was sending you photographs of, and not as if you couldn't look in the back of your own copy of Return of the King.
Well, Andrews in the chat room says, I think the Haradrim might have been involved.
The Haradrim were fighting Gondor at the time. So
Yeah,
that's the reason. So there's an event called the Long Winter that happens during
it's
this time,
yeah,
and it's part of the reason that Gondor and Rohan can't help each other with their respective conflicts going on, because Gondor's fighting the Haradrim and the Corsairs, and Rohan's fighting the Dunlendings, and they've got this massive winter going on. So they're kind of each in their own individual conflicts, and Rohan has a rough time of it during this time.
yeah.
It sounds like there's a big. It sounds very much like Russians in winter. There's famous there's famous maps and battles of the reason Napoleon lost to the Russians is because he thought he could win in a Russian winter, and then Germany thought they could beat Russia during a Russian winter. You
And,
know.
yeah.
So yeah,
Indeed. That,
oh, sorry, Cliff.
go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna say, so I do have the years from my video script actually.
And
So
I've got a year here too. He was asking about
okay,
where Gollum was, and I'm like, I was trying to tell him just real quickly that according to Appendix A, it says here that about this time, where is it? This is where about this time Gollum, where is it? Hides in the Misty Mountains. About this time, Smeagol Gollum hides in the Misty Mountains in 2470, and this is centuries before the events that they're telling in this movie. So Gollum is not going to be
Gollum
around,
is in the Misty Mountains by this point.
With
yeah,
the ring.
but he's not going to be in the story
Right.
at all. No.
Yeah.
So the
And-
ring has no influence at this point. Like
Right.
no one accidentally stumbles on the ring, but they don't take it from him.
No.
And actually, I believe, one of the ideas I had for, if they did want to do kind of a fan servicey tie-in, maybe they have Gandalf, maybe they get Ian McKellen to be like a narrator type figure to like bookend it. I could see something like that, because Gandalf would be in Middle Earth at this time, but he along with the Dunedain are helping the hobbits during the long winter to survive the long winter. So he
This
won't
sounds
show
like-
up.
This
He
sounds
won't
like
show up in like the Helm's Deep story, the Helm Hammerhand story, but you never know, how they play with that,
so
because
they
that's
could
what
get-
he's doing.
They could do literally this Lord of the Rings story could do Winter is Coming better than Game of Thrones.
I'm glad you said that and not me. Yes. But I would agree. I would totally agree with that. Yes.
Well, I'm gonna let me bring up some clips of the Rohirrim charge from Return of the King, and my question to either one of you: these these armies of the Rohirrim, they're huge, and even Theoden is like, this is all that came, but this isn't enough. How big are the armies in War of the Rohirrim?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. Do you, Cliff?
No, I don't. Because I think the fighting, I don't think the fighting is as centralized as it is in the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Yeah. So yeah, so Helm marches out to kind of confront the Dunlendings at the crossings of Eisen, which we saw in the extended edition. That's where Theodred gets attacked. And then they retreat. They're forced to retreat back to the Hornburg. And then it's mostly them just, trying to hold out against, in Helm's Deep, we saw like an overnight siege. Like this is a siege that lasts months, from like November to March. But yeah, I don't recall any specific numbers.
No, Tolkien doesn't mention them, but there's this instance of war, like War of the Rohirrim in the title, is not specifically speaking about one single battle
Yeah.
at one single location.
Right.
There are incidents that are spread out a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
in the
Because with
narrative.
one of the major plot points, I think that they'll probably show in this will be the fact that with the king and most of his soldiers trapped at what would come to be known as Helm's Deep, that enables the leader of the Dunlendings to actually come and overthrow Edoras, and he actually sits on the throne of the Golden Hall. And again, I don't know how spoilerly we want to get, but there's a whole, it's just a few sentences, but there's a whole potential storyline of people reclaiming that throne, I guess you could say.
Is Lindsay in the chat room wants to know, does the Great Plague occur in this part of the timeline?
I do not believe so. That it would be after that's after Sauron's back to Dol Guldur, I believe.
Oh, our YouTube is telling us that our stream just died. Oops. Oh no. Okay. So sorry about that. But no, if I'm not wrong, no, the Great Plague happens in the Second Age, or earlier. Let me look real quick.
1635 of the Third Age.
Okay, 1635. So yeah, it's much earlier.
Yeah, so almost 1,000 years earlier is the Great Plague.
That's right. It's still not that far back as to be that far back.
Ancient, yeah.
My mistake. Yeah, the Great Plague devastates Gondor, 1636. Bam. I'll tell you what.
YouTube clipped us because I was showing the charge of the Rohirrim with no audio.
Really?
Oof.
Wow.
Sorry.
I'll tell them that.
Yeah, YouTube shut us down. I guess I'm not showing any more clips.
Oh, dude.
Easterlings asks Austin.
I don't think I doubt it. I think they're not fighting. Like I mentioned, the Haradrim and the Corsairs are fighting Gondor at this time. Rohan's dealing with the Dunlendings. So there's no mention of the Easterlings fighting against either of them during this time. So I don't anticipate us seeing them.
Well, this is
Wow, looks like we're back up on YouTube. So that's
we're back. Okay. Oh, look at that Gollum mug. That's great.
Oh yeah. This is my live stream mug.
I love that. That's classic. So great.
Yeah.
Well, I still have in the box.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
A wizard cup.
Yeah.
Unboxing.
Yeah.
With the light up base and everything.
With the light up, let's see if it turns on. No, batteries in these batteries. Gandalf. But that Gollum.
Yeah, I've got my Gollum mug, my Gollum Build-A-Bears right back here.
Did you get the new ones?
I did, yeah. He's right back here. he doesn't have any noise. I was really hoping there'd be noise to these things.
They're
But
sold out.
pretty
They
pretty
sold out
stinking cute.
in minutes. They sold
Oh
out
yeah,
in minutes.
yeah. I jumped on it. I did not hesitate.
I love it.
Andrew says that he has the exact same mug. Fausto, tell people come to Twitter. Yes, thank you. YouTube didn't like us showing that clip with no audio for so long. So there's a 10-second clip. Maybe I should be taking more tips from Mr. YouTube here, 250,000 subs, like the rules of copyright.
Yeah, it can get pretty strict. I very, very rarely do I use clips. And yeah, so I've heard that you kind of need to stay under 10 seconds, but even that I tried to, if I can get away with not using video clips, then I
Let
will.
me ask you something, Matt. When it comes
Yeah.
to art, the artwork, and
Mhm.
some of the portraits and paintings that
Yeah.
you show for settings and characters, do you make a pre-arrangement with that artist, or do you ask them for
Mhm.
how to permission, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I have a great number that I have spoken with, and by and large, everyone that I've spoken with has said, yeah, just give me credit in the video. So in the description, I put them all actually in the order they show up in the video. So I try to make it as easy as possible for people to correlate to where they show up.
Well, that's
Sometimes
nice. Very nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
and if they have like websites where people can buy prints, I'll put those in there too, because I part of the cool thing about having this audience is my intention and my hope would be that people would see a piece of artwork that resonates with them and then go and order that. And occasionally I'll find artwork and I can't find the artist, like it's posted on some site, but they don't list the artist. So, I always have in my description as well, like, if you see your artwork and it's not credited, let me know. And I've had a couple situations like that. And so they give me, their name, and then I, kind of put that in my database and everything. But yeah, I've talked to a bunch of artists who've given me permission, and yeah, it's been great. And hopefully, they get people support them and buy their prints.
Camilla in the chat room says, as an artist, thank you for doing that. Kim says, Nerd of the Rings doesn't show anything from the movies. You really play it safe.
Yeah. There was one, like, I actually have a couple of friends who are artists, and I'm like, hey, could you draw like an image of the mounds with the symbol Munas on on Rohan for me, because I cannot find. That's all I want. I just want like a wide shot of all the graves. I can't find it, so I've used like a 3-second clip from the movies because I can't find an artwork of that anywhere. So I've started a list, like, okay, I'm gonna start recommending these to artists. Like, hey man, can you make this?
Do you hashtag the heck out of your posts? Like, how important is Nerd of the Rings hitting 250,000 subs? Like, should we focus more on like hashtagging, or titles, or like?
I don't hashtag very well. I'm not quite to the point, I'm not so out of touch that it's like that commercial where the guy says like, I ordered this thing online, was I hashtagging or something, but
or just tagging the video, because when you upload a video to YouTube, it says name your post. Do you want to monetize it? Is it for children or adults? And and then it asks you to add all the tags.
Yeah, no, I think thumbnails are really, thumbnail and title are kind of the big two that I concentrate on.
Do you do those like?
No, I don't. I hate, like, I think I did it for one, like, early on. I was reacting to the 60 something, the very first animated Hobbit. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's like 12 minutes long. They change a bunch of stuff. They name, like, Smaug is named Slag. They kill him with an arrow made from the Arkenstone. There's a princess named Princess Mika. It's
Yep.
crazy. But yeah,
I
I did.
remember that craziness. It is
Yeah.
the weirdest thing
It's
ever.
so weird. But yeah,
Yeah.
I did. I think I did. That was my very first live stream that I did, and I think I made a thumbnail with a weird face, and I was like, I'm never doing this again.
Back to Nancy in the chat room says, at the crowning of Freyalaf, who is the next king after Helm, Saruman shows up bearing gifts. So there is a chance we'll see Saruman, which means, do they get the voice actor that portrays Darth
Dooku,
Count
Yeah.
Dooku from the Star Wars world?
Yeah,
That
absolutely,
would be really
they
neat.
should.
And Andrew says, I've read that the Dunlendings were allied with the Haradrim at the time of this conflict.
I could see that. They're very geographically separated.
Stephen wants to know, why do people have so much need to change Tolkien's stories? I don't think anything that we've talked about today is changing Tolkien's stories, other than Haldir showing up at Helm's Deep, which a lot of people like.
Yeah. I don't know.
You know, it's Cliff, do you think fandom is more allowing or more amenable to adaptation changes because Peter Jackson's movies were so good, or do you think it's going to always be hardcore?
I was just looking up the voice actor. His name is Corey Burton. Corey Burton, who does and has for hundreds of episodes been the voice of Count Dooku.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I wouldn't say no to that, but again, just to leave that as a footnote, we don't know if they're going to end the story with, like a still shot of frozen Helm Hammerhand just standing there in silhouette against a frozen landscape, or we don't know if they're going to actually go further down to the crown.
Maybe a post-credit scene or mid-credit scene or something.
Yeah.
Saruman.
Cool. Yeah,
maybe someone shows up with a giant glowing ball and he holds it over his head and says peace, like the end of the Phantom Menace, and then Saruman takes that glowing ball and it turns out it's a Palantir.
Oh, you're so funny, dude. No,
Phantom Menace.
I'm grateful to Nancy in the live chat for pointing out those excellent bits of the story, because the successor to Helm was Freyalaf, right?
Yes.
And it would be a great post-credit sequence to have the crowning of Freyalaf, and then bam, here comes Saruman showing up with gifts. That would cause such conversation, and the fans would love it, and it's canonical to Tolkien. So maybe
true to Tolkien. Cliff, since you're the anime expert here at the table,
and I will. Can I say I make one point with Freyalaf? I don't inject much humor into my regular videos, but I couldn't help but notice, one of the great ancestors of Shadowfax is Felaroth, and then we have a king that's Freyalaf. I'm pretty sure that his dad was like, I want to name him Felaroth, and his mom was just like, no, you're not naming our son after a horse. But still, horses can be named after people. People should not be named after horses. So she's like, change it a little bit. So it's like the copying homework thing. Like, just change it a little bit, make it your own.
Isn't this so appropriate for the men of Rohan and the Rohirum, especially, to name themselves after horses? Come on.
I don't know. I guess if you're gonna name yourself after a horse, that would be a good one. He's like the Lord of all horses kind of thing.
You can hear the jokes writing themselves in Minas Tirith, where people are sharing a pint and making a joke and saying, "Yeah, it's a Rohan thing."
Yeah.
Well, I think we touched upon it briefly in the show, and if you follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and you looked at the post on the website, you'll know that the Animated Hobbit from 1977, everyone's cherished first touch with Tolkien for many people is seeing that cartoon on VHS or whatever, or live on TV. It was animated by Topcraft, who eventually became Studio Ghibli, and
they were hired by Rankin and Bass, which was a production office in New York City, So it was an intercoastal, two-country production
Just like
between.
this is.
Yeah, just like this is exactly.
Just like this is. So the question is, The Hobbit is squarely aimed at children, like for sure, and we love it because we saw it as children. Cliff, the question to you from the chat is, where is it? Samantha asks, what age group will this animation be aimed at?
Hopefully, it will be rated. I hope it will be rated R. If it's just PG-13,
What?
this
It's
is like
that is it's the
this is a
gatekeeping is
dark.
the wrong word, but that is
It's a dark
shutting
story.
off the next generation of Tolkien fans.
If they want this to be appreciated for the dark story that it is, and if they want it to be as creepy and dark in theme, it's about the like some of the like if nobody that I know of is involved in this kind of secret guerrilla warfare in Tolkien's history the way that Helm Hammerhand does. It is a little chapter of ugliness in war and famine and the things. There's nothing pleasant about it. So yeah, it could be PG-13 if they don't want to have it be super.
So you don't want kids watching this at all. This is an adult tale for adults.
It's not about the violence. The animation could be as violent as it wants to be. Take a look at what we're watching nowadays on Invincible, which is the most hyper violent thing in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is not Tolkien in animation. Tolkien in animation has been accessible.
Think about The Revenant. Think about how grueling and uncomfortable it is with Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant.
Think about the box office that this movie is going to be theatrical because they have to put it in theaters. It has to be accessible.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah. It has to be accessible, but if it's going to be true to the story of Helm Hammerhand, I don't think they should shy away from going for an R rating. And I'm not advocating for the violence to be amped up. I'm talking about the tone and the content of the story itself being as dark as it wants to be. Who's with me on this? Am I crazy?
You're the tiebreaker. Tiebreaker right here. Let's see who he goes for.
So I'll say, I'm gonna watch it either way. As a father of kids that have seen the movies and love the movies, I would love to be able to share a theatrical Lord of the Rings experience with them. And I think he wheels off screen. So I will say, you could definitely make the case, as Cliff definitely did well, that you could do this film and do it well with an R rating. I think you could do it just as well with a PG-13. I think there's, one of the reasons that I am not a Game of Thrones guy is just the gratuitousness that, in my opinion, others don't share that opinion. That's totally fine. In my opinion, for my views, I'm not a fan because I feel like it's over the top. I think, there is a lot to be said for stories that leave violence up to the imagination when it gets to a certain point. Mm-hmm. And I think in a way, rather than showing and letting, there's a lot to say for something that cuts away at the right point, but like leaves you with, sounds of something going on and like lets you imagine, there's power in that. And, I think kids, I think back to some of the movies we watched, probably when we were kids, kids can handle more than, we might give them credit for, in terms of complexity of story. And, as long as you're not going over the top with the visuals, they can handle some things like, this overthrow of Edoras. And, one of the things I think could be dark. This is just I'm going to go off on a small tangent here for a theory for a second. So, speaking of ways that could tie back to the films, we're talking about how it could tie into the cinematic universe. One of the lines from Return of the King, no, Two Towers, is when Eowyn says, "Women of this country learned long ago that those without swords could still die upon them." And so I'm thinking, we never in Tolkien's story learn what happens. Helm's daughter is mentioned. She's kind of a key point early in the story. We never hear what happens to her. Like, so is she, part of what Eowyn is referencing? Like, will we get this tragic end to his daughter?
We've been
Where,
told about Shield Maidens of Rohan
yeah.
for 70 years, 60 years, and 20 years in the films. Is this the movie we see Shield Maidens of Rohan at their peak?
See, do we have, I don't know. I'd have to look more into this, whether we have record. I always had the impression that Eowyn was kind of like the mold breaker in that sense. So I could see it being like in the sack of Edoras, maybe there are shield maidens, but tragically none of them lived to tell that story. That's why Eowyn is the first, because no one was alive to tell the story of this other group. Right, when Eowyn is actually the last, but she's the only one who has her story told because she's the one who made it through, and maybe, the princess of Rohan, leads this last ditch effort to try to save Edoras and is tragically lost in the process. I don't know. This is just all theoretical, but it gives me goosebumps and gets me all the more jazzed to watch this movie.
I like the way you think. I really do, Matt. I love the way you think.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked at your responses. You want the hard R. You want this to go full maximum because.
No. I said don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Yeah, okay, don't be shy. But
let the darkness of the story itself. It doesn't even have to be hyper violent.
But you said rated R. You were immediately rated R.
But fine, if it's PG-13 and still.
But this is different than what you've said about what you want out of Amazon's show. You said if this goes to Game of Thrones, it's going to not be Tolkien. And now I'm hearing you want to go more into Game of Thrones.
No, I don't think I'm contradicting myself in that way at all. No, actually, the darkness of adapting any of these Tolkien stories that get as uncomfortable and tragic as they ultimately do. We're looking at you, Beren and Luthien. We're looking at everything else in the Silmarillion and all the other things that are going to be eventually up for grabs for people to adapt eventually when that happens. All I've ever said is that the community should brace itself for when it happens, because it's not going to be a frolic in the park with Bilbo and 13 dwarves. Things, especially a story like what happens to Helm Hammerhand, things are going to get dark, and I mean grim, and that's going to be okay. And if it's PG-13 and still maintains that quality of being super dark and uncomfortable with tones of gruesomeness and the supernatural.
I mean, you're dealing with like famine and stuff like that too. Yeah.
All right. Look, and Andrew in the chat room wants to remind me that Battle of the Five Armies Extended Edition was rated R, and and my counterpoint to that is that's
just so we could see trolls get like their legs chopped off or whatever with the chariot.
Battle of Five Armies is the least watched Middle Earth film in history. I'm just going to say it. Besides the Russian edition, no one sits down and says, "I think I'm going to watch that movie again." So, but Cliff, I guess.
Whoa. Okay.
I guess we've talked about on the show that I guess we've talked about on the show for 3 years now that Lord of the Rings is a family affair, and people sit down at Christmas time and watch it together as a family. And yes, it gets violent and stuff like that, and some of the extended editions are rated R, but they're not Game of Thrones rated R. And we've talked about how the Amazon show, if it wants to carry on that magic and that strength of audience expectations, is that it can't go Game of Thrones. It can't be too violent. And it can't, even though we know the Second Age gets really violent. So it's interesting to hear you just hear anime and Hammerhand and be like, give it all. Let me see it all.
Okay, well, I actually did say don't be shy to go as dark as you want to do, and animation can do that. How long has it been since we've had an R-rated animated feature in theaters that has done?
You haven't said that about Amazon's real show.
Well, okay, if Amazon is going
Real
to,
show. What?
Live action. Sorry, live action. I guess, is there a difference between animation and live action that allows animation to go a little further?
yeah, the big difference is that there's no stories of human sacrifice and people being having their hearts cut out of their chest on the altar of Morgoth. We're not going to have that happen in our
This sounds like Temple of Doom.
so
Yeah.
right. Come on, Matt. What do you think?
He's struggling right now. I'm holding
I'm
his feet to the fire. Look.
I'm not struggling. I'm telling you that the darkness of the story that we're about to get in animation at the hands of somebody who did Ghost in the Shell, standalone complex, and stories that are thematically dark and we're talking about things that get pushed in those stories. Ghost in the Shell is pushing the definition, like Black Mirror often does, of how we interpret AI and how we define life forms and science fiction questions that get dark and heady and put us on the line for the responsibility of what we're creating with technology and how technology is messing up our lives. And it goes dark. Sometimes it goes really violent, but it doesn't have to be violent to be, it does not have to be violent to be just as disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
if you want to do
Okay.
Helm Hammerhand and it can be disturbing, it might still just don't be shy of what Professor Tolkien is giving you in the story department. And you've got these guys from the Dark Crystal who did some dark stuff in the Dark Crystal, and they're going to write with their writer's room. And they're going to put all this stuff together. Maybe there's not even a writer's room. Maybe it's like not even being done TV style. Maybe it's just the two of them.
It's
and
not TV style. It's a movie.
great.
They're writing a movie.
My wisdom is still pretty central. Don't be afraid of getting the story to be as dark and uncomfortable as Professor Tolkien let it go. I mean, he killed a man barehanded with one blow from his fist. There are people starving in the waste of winter. He's sneaking out in the middle of the night and slitting dozens and dozens of throats in the middle of the night to terrorize them in the darkness of who he is. This is not playtime with Bilbo and happy dwarves in brightly colored pastel hoods. This is a very different. So I'm telling you, people, if it doesn't have to be violent, fine. It doesn't have to be Game of Thrones, but it does have to be, in my mind, a success if they want it to be the way Tolkien wrote it. Tell me I'm crazy now. Tell me I'm crazy.
Well, final question, Matt.
I will say. Oh, go ahead, Justin.
Are
we going off of this?
I'm just going off the clock. So I'm just changing subject. I'm saying I want to know.
Well, let me
Matt.
say. I want to say. I want to say something. To Cliff.
Please.
Okay, so
Please.
I will say the small correction is that Helm Hammerhand went out bare hand. Yeah, all he had, he sounded his horn and he went out with his bare hands. So there's no slitting.
Okay, forgive me.
He probably
Yeah, right,
snapped some necks.
So-
he probably snapped some
well,
necks.
But
Is he
called Hammerhand because he hammers people with his hand, or is he holding a hammer?
So Fricka, the guy who's half Rohirrim, half Dunlending, who he tries to force Helm Hammerhand to marry Helm's daughter to Fricka's son. He wants them. He wants them to marry, and Helm basically says, like, let's take this outside, smacks him in the head, kills him, and that's how he gets Hammerhand as his name, because it was one punch essentially from his hand.
Okay. And the fact that he's deadly without a knife, I retract my statement. Let's just say that's even more creepy. And
no, it totally is.
This is very Thrones. This is very Thrones.
So I will say, kind of going back a little bit to my point, you don't have to go the R or the violent, the Game of Thrones route, for lack of a better term, for that. I'll always make the case that, Tolkien himself, if you're sticking with the tone of Tolkien, those things are in there, but they're never, you don't relish in those things, like the human sacrifice. It's kind of a note in the list of things that are going on. And you mentioned, Justin, Temple of Doom. Temple of Doom is a movie that's kind of scary. They have, a guy getting his heart pulled out, and human sacrifice, similar stuff to what we're talking about. I would show my kids Temple of Doom way before I would ever put them in front of a Game of Thrones episode. There's
Really?
there's a world of difference there. World of difference.
Really?
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely.
This is amazing.
And-
This is amazing because it was the presence of that violence in the Temple of Doom that caused parents groups to revolt,
Right, get
and have like a cultural
PG-13.
backlash, and that made them develop the PG-13
Right.
rating. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, I'll show my kids Temple of Doom. I haven't shown it to them yet, but that will come. I'll
So
probably
that's
never
the
show them Game
tone-
of Thrones, but
That's the
yeah,
tone.
but something like that, I feel like that's as far as you would ever have to go to
Mhm.
tell a Tolkien story well. And again, this is kind of a larger thing that I have with a lot of movies nowadays is, this whole like, let's gross you out or, shock you. And, that's never a thing that Tolkien pursues, to shock you with these things. I mean, that you,
True.
I mean, shock you in a way that's, this sensationalized violence kind of thing, or like we revel in, like
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, like we crush a guy's skull with our bare hands. Like that's never something that Tolkien would even consider doing. So I think there's power, like I said, just an example of like, there's something bad about to happen and you cut to black, but you hear the sound or something,
Mhm.
stuff like that saves you from the overexposure of the violence, but it still gives you that disturbing sense that Cliff's talking about. So there's definitely a balance there, and I'm hoping for both these projects that they manage to, straddle that line of, let's do justice to the story and the horror that's going on, but let's not relish in it and, make that what we're about. Like, let's keep, whatever the theme of the story, whether it's Prime or, this Rohan story, whatever the theme and the lessons Tolkien wants us to take away from these, let's make that the main thing. And this is, just paying homage to that story in an appropriate way and showing the disturbing nature in a Tolkien way, I guess.
Well said. That's very well said. Thank you for saying that. There is a great deal to learn from Tolkien, telling us that these people lived with such hardship. And he's given us a lot of clues in The Lord of the Rings about the hardships that the Rohirrim have suffered over ages and ages. And this is like
Gondor never helps them, by the way. Ever.
I know, ever. And this is
elves.
I think it'll be a great, interesting parallel with, and it might be a really excellent companion piece with the other 6 films. In the end, I agree with exactly what Matt said. There's a darkness there that can be embraced in Tolkien without being, outrageous or being done in the style of other authors who revel in it in a certain weird way, because Tolkien never did. But yeah,
Tolkien never chose. Kim in the chat room reminds us Tolkien never chose to make those violent stories his main stories. He references violence only in passing. It's never the main focus.
Correct.
Does this action of making this movie feels less like Tolkien or more like Tolkien because he avoided the grotesque?
I mean, I think it kind of depends. Like, the tricky thing with this story is, and the same thing with Prime is you've got footnotes, you've got general ideas of what happens. You don't have a fully fleshed out story. So you could go into this and say, someone might look at this and say, we're going to take the approach like this is going to be hyper violent. Helm's going to crush this guy's skull to start this feud, and then they're going to go starve, and, people are going to be dying left and right. Or you look at it and say, like, Helm's going to take, we're going to have this conflict, the human spirit's going to win out, kind of like Helm's Deep, the first time around, like the Rohirrim are going to come out on top. Freyalof, his nephew, is going to be a main character because he's the one that reclaims Edoras. And then, so it could end on a hopeful note, even though Helm ultimately dies. So I think, what I'm hoping is that they look at it and say, if Tolkien were to flesh out this story, he is less likely to go in a totally different direction and go the grotesque way. He would be more likely to stick with the the more Lord of the Rings esque storytelling method, and like the theme of overcoming hardship is more likely to win out than like look how far man can fall kind of thing.
Indeed.
Cliff, so the question is the story of Helm Hammerhand something that Tolkien actually wanted to flesh out?
Maybe so. Yeah, it's there. That's there's such a
Is
triumphant.
it though?
There's
Is it?
why why is there such a triumphant energy when we read that the horn of Helm Hammerhand will sound once again in the deep, in the deeping
And
combs?
why is it the dwarf that blows the horn?
Well,
That's
in the movie,
movies.
it dwarf
Yeah.
blows the horn. Is that the way it happens in the book too?
I don't think.
Let me double check.
Yeah.
Let me just say that there's a reference that you can make to Rogue One, because in Rogue One it was a Star Wars movie, spoilers, where nobody makes it.
Yeah.
And
Is
It's a
that what
great
this
movie.
is?
this story of Helm Hammerhand, don't you think, Matt? It might also be that
Yeah.
kind of a story that ends up with it's not a happy ending, and the
Mhm.
Titanic actually sinks in the end, and
Right.
nobody makes it, except for Gloria Stewart,
I
right?
think yeah, I think honestly the Rogue One comparison could be a really, really good comparison, because you've got not only Helm, but both of his sons are with him, and
Yep.
they die, and that kind of leads Helm to kind of lose it a little bit between that and the famine. That's what leads him to go out on these solo missions to terrorize the Dunlendings. But with Rogue One, all of our main characters bite it, and then but we end on that symbol of hope where they get the plans out, they accomplish their mission, and maybe that's the end with Freyalof coming back to reclaim Edoras, and yeah, so we still, they outlasted the Dunlendings. You have survivors from Helm's Deep to tell the tale of Helm, and the nephew avenges his uncle.
Mhm.
Yeah, I could see it playing out very similar to the, structure wise, to Rogue One.
I'm enthusiastic as you are, Matt, and Justin. I'm sure you might be too. I'm really enthusiastic about the possibilities that are here with characters. Of course, Freka's son Wolf wants
Yeah.
to be married. We'll get to meet that character. We'll
This
probably
whole
get to
thing
meet,
sounds Thronesian. Yeah.
we'll get to meet Helm's daughter, right? Like you mentioned, and these are characters that Professor Tolkien did not flesh out, and there's a lot of corners and lines to be drawn here within what we read in the appendix.
Oh,
And
the other
I'm
big
looking
question
forward
I
to it.
had is, sorry to interrupt. I'm really bad at this. Um, the other question I had is, in Lord of the Rings, uh, Theoden says, "Where was Gondor when the Westfold fell?" Is this that story?
No, because he's referring to the Westfold falling at the hands of Saruman,
Mhm.
much closer, like within the
Okay.
past several months
That's
before
right.
that.
So this
Yeah.
isn't that story.
No,
No.
he's talking about recent events
Yeah.
that,
Okay.
or
But it's a
to
common
him be
question. You
more
could ask
central.
it pretty
Yeah.
much in every Rohan video I make about a conflict with Rohan. I have to explain where Gondor was, because I know that question will come up. So in my video all about Helm Hammerhand and Rohan, I said, by the way, this is what Gondor was doing, and this is why they couldn't be there.
I love you, Matt. I love you, Matt, for doing that. I love it. I love it. It's great.
Well, for a final question from the chat, and the chat, you guys have been wonderful, and I love the comments and everything like that. The final question is, Austin asks, "Is Howard Shore the composer?" The answer is, we don't know yet. The legal answer is Warner Brothers owns that music. Warner Brothers can use that music. Warner Brothers has tracks of that music. But as we learned in our many conversations with Doug Adams, who is Howard Shore's partner in publishing, we learned over the pandemic that Howard Shore did not slice and dice his recordings like some other composers do for Christopher Nolan movies, mostly. But he the reason that it costs so much for Howard Shore's music is because they would do take after take of the whole orchestration, of whole scenes. So it's not cut up. So Warner Brothers does not have cut up segments of the themes and portions. And so we asked Doug Adams on Twitter, and he says, I can't imagine a scenario where this film will be made with track music from the old movies.
Yeah.
Now
can they, with them owning the themes, I guess, like, could hypothetically somebody else, perform similar or like adapt,
Yes,
I guess, from that?
They own the notes, they own the paper, they own everything that Howard Shore created. But
I mean,
again,
obviously, Plan A would just be to bring back Howard Shore. I would think,
to your question, Doug Adams continues in another tweet, at the risk of being an old fuddy-duddy. He's like, Doug Adams says, I actually don't want to hear another composer toying with Howard's themes. It's not just the tunes that make them great. It's the orchestrations, the accompaniments, and the development.
Yes.
I agree.
That sounds good to me.
And yes, Matt, it's as simple as that. Categorically, they should bring back Howard Shore and have him score the whole bloody thing from the top down. That's exactly what they should do.
That would be amazing. And
so as we go along on the show, I just want to tell everybody, like, Howard Shore's music, the question is, are they going to use it for this anime film? And the short answer is, legally, they can do whatever they want because they own it. I will say this in connection with Amazon. When the Tolkien estate sold the television rights, Amazon paid a crazy price, unheard of, for the rights. And one of the reasons it was so expensive is in the original announcement, Amazon said they had acquired rights or had planned to acquire rights that were included with the what Warner Brothers had produced. And what we have heard over the years, Cliff, is that there have been years-long negotiations between Amazon and Warner Brothers and Howard Shore and Weta and everybody involved. Amazon saying, "Hey, can we use that? Can we use that music? Can we use the Weta designs for this?" And and it's become apparent now at the announcement of this feature film from Warner Brothers that Warner Brothers just said, "Hold up, we have the movie rights, we have a cinematic universe, and we're going to keep making movies. We're going to keep exploiting the IP that we spent billions making." So I expect that this announcement with Warner Brothers Animation making a Lord of the Rings anime based in Peter Jackson's universe is the door closing on any connection with Amazon series. I think Amazon is now free to go it alone and be a whole different universe. And I think that's what's happening here.
That's intriguing. Very intriguing. I don't know. Maybe the proof will be when we get to look at any of the live action stuff that Amazon is producing and filming down there, obviously. But it might be so that there might be maybe a divorce, for lack of a better term, in style choices and design elements from Amazon's world to the existing cinematic world of the 6 films, which will now be a cinematic world of 7 films, now that I'm stopping to remind myself of this.
That's right. Well, Nerd of the Rings is on YouTube. He's a 250,000 club. He might even get a YouTube thing for the wall now. He's got so many.
I've got one right here. Yeah, this is the 100,000 one. If I can get it off the hooks here.
That is hefty.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, that's 100. Yeah, 100,000. They give you one.
So since October, in the middle of the pandemic, you've gone from zero to hero. You've gotten a plaque from YouTube, and now you're at a 250,000 club.
250,000, yeah. So the next, they give you a gold one if you get to 1 million. So
that's
we'll
great.
see. We'll see. One day, maybe.
I don't. I'm not going to lie. I was going to compliment the fact that you have that behind you on the wall in your shots. I was going to compliment you on how lovely that is, but you've secured it so well to the
I know.
wall, it almost defeated you now trying to
It
get it.
did. Yeah, it
And I
was,
love that
trying to
thing.
take me down. Yeah.
I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. It's great.
Well, congratulations on all your success. I'm
Thank
excited
you.
that
Very much.
you've laid the groundwork for the next 10 years of awesome movies and television and whatever else we're getting. We're getting new video games based in Tolkien.
Yes.
We're getting new board games based on, we're getting everything. We're even
Mhm.
getting new books about Tolkien
Yes.
and his world. So like
Nature of Middle Earth. Yeah.
you're
Can't wait for
primed to
that.
be just a leading voice, and thank you for keeping a positive community
Absolutely.
on your channel and you know, Tolkien just you know, in all of Tolkien's letters, you know, he hated when people tried to pit communities against each other.
Yeah.
You know, whether he was writing to Germany or he was writing to the hugging hippies that were embracing, you know, in their drug culture. He was just like, look, he writes for everybody, and I'm glad
Huh.
that your channel represents everybody and is just a nice positive tone.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we were chatting a little bit before we got going live, but I want this space to be, like you said, a positive space. We all love Middle Earth. We all love Tolkien. And, you know, we can come from completely different worldviews, completely different ends of the spectrum in terms of our faith or our political leanings. The truth is, you know, you know, when you look at with Tolkien's works and relate it to our lives, you know, you can be total opposites of somebody, but you have this to bond over. You never know who that person is on the other side of the tweet or whatever it is. I mean, you can disagree on everything, but bond over this. I mean, you never know, you know, when you're going to meet your Gimli to your Legolas or your Legolas to your Gimli if you're more of a dwarf person, I guess. But, you know, just like that,
Yes.
we don't have to make this complicated. You know, it like
Not at all.
it's just Tolkien, guys. Like, just let's just live in Middle Earth together and yeah, seek to understand one another. That's all yeah. That's my little soapbox moment. I like to stay positive on my channel. That's what you're gonna get when you come to my channel. It's all Tolkien and
Yep.
very little soapbox for me. So that's as much as I will say on that.
Thank you, and thank you for crystallizing it so well into such that is succinct and very adroit in the way you say that. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Matt. It is so much a pleasure to have you come and join us in a healthy and maybe a little overlong conversation today on our live stream. It's fantastic to have you.
See
And
what I do with a little bit of official information.
do you have something else to close the show, Mr. Justin? I want to thank my guest and as a friend and part of our community. As always, we're all ringers. We're all in the same boat together. We all realize that when we read J.R.R. Tolkien, it makes us better people, always, in the end. And since we all realize that together, I think that we're going to have a good time together.
Yeah.
As we go forward as a community, things are going to be fine. And I
Yep.
really appreciate your sentiment and your intelligence, Matt. And oh my God, I love your maps. I love your maps.
He's obsessed. Well,
The maps are great.
A programming note: next week, it's looking like we've been working on this for months and months and months. But the 4 founders of the OneRing.net who live in 3 different countries have finally cleared their schedules, and it looks like next Tuesday we're gonna have a very special reunion. They haven't seen each other in since the Return of the King Oscar party. This is the first time that the 4 founders of the OneRing.net. We're gonna go into all of the details, all the history of the One Ring. How many times have we been sued? How many times did the studios threaten us? How, you know, where is the server hosted? How many times has our site been down? And you know, what you know, maybe I can get an idea of like what we can do, you know, with both Amazon and Warner Brothers making new stuff. Like, you know, what should we be afraid of and what should we embrace and what are our limits? And it's just going to be a great conversation. So that's next week. And Cliff, I have a birdie that whispered in my ear today.
Oh God.
And I have not verified what I heard,
What?
but I heard that we might. Oh man, I'm just. You know what? Just next week might be big.
What new devilry is this?
Not next. I'm telling you, Cliff. Clear your schedule for next week. It might be big.
Okay. I feel like Sean Bean whispering into Gandalf's ear, what new devilry is this? I don't know. You know, Matt, you're lucky that you get to run your show. You don't have somebody popping surprises on you all the time every week.
I was gonna say that teaser left me more confused than like a teaser for a Christopher Nolan movie. I have no idea what to expect.
That's funny. Okay. It is time to say our farewells. Thank you to our live audience for joining us and for putting up with YouTube blocking our stream, for copyright call outs, and thank you to everybody for being such a great part of our ongoing community. It's been a couple of decades, and here's to many, many more. And a special thanks to the new kids on the block and the YouTubers who are coming up and shining bright with this great content. Yoistan and the guys at History of the Ages and Fresh Nerd Cookies, and I'm loving Nerd of the Rings, obviously. And then there's the Philosopher's Games. And who am I forgetting? I love all these. I love what we got.
In Deep Geek is another really good one.
I love In Deep Geek. Yes. And the voice of geekdom, who have been so kind to ask me to join them, and John Webster Films and his shows, his podcast. We've got a great bunch.
Olson, the Tolkien professor.
Yes.
He's just so wonderful.
Yes, Corey Olson. Hello out there. We love you, Corey. So good stuff. And it's been a great show. So we say goodnight. A special thanks to Justin for co-hosting with me and for pulling all the technical levers in the background. So I
still got a copyright strike on the show on YouTube, and that's not good. No wonder we're failing and he's succeeding.
I love it. All right, so until next time, next Tuesday is going to be a very big and exciting show here at TheOneRing.net. Once again, this is Torn Tuesday. You can follow us on all the social channels at TheOneRing.net. Just take the dot out of it. And the main website, you can launch your Safari browser. And if you're still using Firefox, good for you. Go to TheOneRing.net and go look us up at our main website. Me, Clifford Broadway, you know me. I'm at QuickBeam 2000. And Nerd of the Rings, that's Matt. He's at Nerd of the Rings. So we'll see you guys next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Thank you, one and all, and good night and good luck, or better yet, buenos noches y buena suerte. Bye, everyone.
Bye.